In a world where heroes, knights, and adventurers are a thing, there exists Rude, a tank of a particular hero party who's said to have the highest defense ever in history. Being severely underrated, Rudd restricted himself to be the dispensable part of the group he was in to avoid getting noticed. So, he would often go on raids with his team and help them out in the littlest way he could, hiding his strength so he wouldn't get too busy to check on his sick sister. To him, doing his thing low-key is the best thing, seeing as he only joined the guild to go on labyrinth hunts, and hopefully find the infamous wish-granting treasure that might be hidden in one of the labyrinths. Rudd plans on using this treasure to heal his sick sister so she can become whole once again. One day, however, things take a turn for the worse during one of Rudd's labyrinth hunts with his colleagues. This time, they were facing a golem monster that nearly overtook all of them. The team is split into several magic users with different roles like attacking, healing, and most importantly, the tank, who defends the entire team with his life and shield all while paving the way for the other members to either escape or attack the monster head-on. Being the team's only tank, Rudd makes sure to do his job properly and protect his teammates from the monster's attack. The battle between the team and the S-Class monster stretches for hours on end, until their pompous leader steps in to take the monster down completely. The following day, Rudd gets to the guild early for their next assignment. While waiting for the other to come by, he falls into a daydream and starts thinking about his cute little sister Manisha. To some, Rudd may be somewhat in love with his sister, judging by how many times he thinks and fantasizes about her just calling his name. That day, Nin, the only noble saint in their hero party, caught him lacking yet again, and called him back to reality. Rudd blames her for spoiling his fun afternoon moment, and asks her why she would do such an unthinkable thing. Nin, however, tells him to quit making stupid faces in front of everyone in the guild, so they all don't think he's weird or something. It was then that Rudd looked around and noticed that people were staring at him. He gets a little embarrassed and apologizes to everyone for weirding them out. Moving on, Nin tells him to try thinking about another person, instead of just fantasizing about his little sister like a pedophile. Rudd, however, asks for some more clarification, and Nin tells him to think about romance. More so, he can notice those who have a thing for him. Our boy Rudd still couldn't get the green flag to figure out that Nin actually liked him. He continues praising Manika, calling her cute and cuddly, which pisses Nin off. She tries to take it out on poor Rudd, but then Rudd goes on a yap to talk about his sister's incurable disease and just how much the secret treasure of the labyrinth is going to help him get that disease off her body. At this point, Nin knew it would be unreasonable to get pissed at the sad brother any longer. So, she tries to cheer him up. This seemed to encourage Rudd to get further into some self-deprecating thoughts as he recounts his actions from the previous labyrinth raid. Apparently, Rudd ran out of magic points way too fast this time, and didn't understand why it was so. Nin also joins him in the discussion, and tries to figure out what could have happened. To make matters worse, Rudd tells her he's been experiencing such rapid decline in his absorb shield anytime he enters the labyrinth with all of them. He tried everything, taking potions, performing healing spells, and even stressing the saint, Nin, aka the team's healer, but nothing seemed to reduce the problem. After hearing her love interest talk all about his failures, Nin felt like it was enough. She speaks out and tells him to believe more in his power. Having the highest absorb shield value of 9,999, Rude's power is a big flex, and she tells him not to be ashamed to show it off to everyone around him. She continues cheering him up until the great hero, Kaigles, aka the leader of their hero party, shows up with the others, Lilia and Lily, with a bunch of other goons. He steps up to Rude and, without warning, fires him on the spot. Before letting him go, however, he introduces his replacement to Rude and tells him to wish them good luck. Nin gets confused and asks Kaigles for an explanation. With a smug look, Kaigles fires Rude again and reminds him of his horrible performance in the labyrinth the previous day. Kaigles found it unnecessary for Rude to remain in the team due to his lack of power. Rather than getting to the source of the problem, Kaigles thought it necessary to deal with Rudd with an iron fist. Nin still tries to explain things to Kaigles, but then Kaigles accuses Rude of neglecting his duties and putting them all in danger even when he was only trying to protect them. Besides, he walks over to his replacements, a bunch of evasion tank newbies, and calls them better than the big man himself. Dejected, Rudd remains frozen in his stance and listens to the good-for-nothing Kaigles oust him from the group he so believed in. After gathering his thoughts, Rudd summons the courage to walk and leave the guild with his dignity. As if his words weren't enough, Kaigles collects Rudd's sword and calls him an incompetent tank, before laughing his arse off and walking out of the guild like the arsehole he is. Shortly afterward, Nin tearfully gets close to him and sheds a little tears on Rudd, asking him where he's going to go now that he's lost his only job in the capital. Rudd tells her not to worry too much about him and that he'll be perfectly fine living with his sister in the little town where she lives, Avancia. Before parting ways, Rudd invites Nin to come to visit him in Avancia anytime she wants. A ray of hope shines across Nin's face as she promises to come visit him sometime soon. After that, the two part ways and head to their daily activities. Rudd, on the other hand, hangs around the town's fountain. There, he sits and thinks about the weird perk associated with his defensive powers. At the time, Rudd didn't fully understand the extent of his power, so he thought about the power drain to be a defect rather than a blessing in disguise. Not like any of that matters now that he's lost his job as an adventurer. As he sulks into his new reality, he overhears 3 D-rank adventurers complaining about taking an escort job to Kuras, a town a little bit ahead of Avancia. Rudd puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that he'd be in the clear to help them out. So he opts in and asks to join them without pay. Before letting him on their team, the runts ask after his adventurer rank. Rudd's face goes sour with fear as he realizes that he's still in F rank. Thankfully, one of the runts remembers Rudd's face from the hero party. Rudd's reputation helps him for the day, and they all let him join their team. Soon, their client shows up and introduces himself to the adventurers meant to protect him. Without further ado, they all hop on the carriage heading out of town to journey to Kuras. Rudd settles in for a ride of his life and ends up enjoying his time with the little adventurers. Thankfully, nothing happens for most of the journey. One night, Rudd and the others pass through a foggy forest and they get very suspicious. Since they're nearly at their destination, Rudd decides to rough his way through the fog to get there in one piece. They ride through the fog slowly until Rudd tells them to stop after hearing something breathe from the fog. Upon close inspection, Rudd walks forward and finds a white-haired lady standing close to him. He checks around for a while to make sure she's not luring him into a trap. When he's sure she isn't bad, he bends down and tries to talk to the girl. The girl cowers in fear and tries to shoo him away. However, Rudd wasn't scared of her, so he gets closer and finds a magic stone on her chest after finding out how unclothed she is. Confused, he thinks through the number of possibilities, but doesn't get enough time to conclude a forest snake appears shortly. While everyone rushes to hide from the snake, Rudd takes out his shield to face the snake head-on like a champ. He calls the snake and provokes it so it will attack him. This works, and the snake turns its head towards Rudd before spitting its acidic venom on his shield. While shielding himself from the venom, Rudd tells the others to attack while it's distracted. Sadly, they were all too scared to attack him, so the snake attacked him and almost knocked him out. Thankfully, a vision of his little sister Manisha crying jilts him back to reality and urges him to get back on his feet. This time, however, he instructs the adventurers to muscle up and fight the snake with all their strength, while he blocks all its attacks. The snake continues pounding at Rudd and creates an opening for the others to attack it. The other adventurers find the opening and exploit it to land multiple attacks on the snake. The snake prepares a killing blow and digs itself into the ground so it can gather enough momentum to kill Rudd. Rudd stands his ground and blocks the attack, stunning the snake in the process. Before he knows it, the kids gather for a final attack and end up taking the snake out. After defeating the snake, Rudd tells the kids to carve up the snake while he walks a little further to check up on the little girl he found earlier. He finds her sitting quietly and asks her if she is running from the snake. The girl tells him she was actually running from the snake, but then again, she has nowhere to go at this point. Rudd takes pity on her and invites her to journey to his hometown in Avancia so she can live with him and his sister. The girl tries to be modest, but then again, Rudd insists she come with him to the place. So, the girl finally succumbs to his persuasion and holds his hands. Shortly afterward, the client shows up and offers his robe as a gift to Rudd for helping him defeat the monster. Rudd gives the girl the robe and lets her go change before continuing his journey. As she runs away from him, Rudd thinks about the lady's real identity as a homunculus and wonders how hard life must have been for her, especially now that she had to travel alone. He tells the client not to worry too much about her and that he'll make sure to take care of her from then on. The following day, Rudd and the homunculus girl arrive at Avancia and part ways with the client and the other 3 D-rank adventurer kids. Before letting him go, the 3 kids try to recruit them into his party, but then again, Rudd turns down their offer and tells them his true intentions to find the sacred item that can grant any of his wishes. The 3 kids talk about homunculi and insult every part of them. Rudd checks up on the homunculus girl standing near him and finds her shrieking from the insults, so he quickly stops the kids from saying too much about homunculi and then takes his leave with the girl. On their way home, Rudd takes the homunculus girl through the beautiful parts of the forest and introduces himself to Rudd. He then turns to the girl and asks for her name. The girl lets him know that she doesn't have a name. Rudd feels very bad for the poor girl and names her Luna from then henceforth. The girl thanks him greatly and accepts her new name. The two continue their journey up until nightfall. After dinner, they get attacked by some wild dogs and Luna takes them all down with her knife. Rudd, who witnessed the entire thing, realizes that Luna must be an illegal homunculus. Nevertheless, he knows he can't abandon her now that he's found her. So, he asks her about her powers. Luna tells him she has a skill that amplifies magic, and also the identity support skill, a very rare skill that was thought to be lost to history. Rudd wastes no time in asking the lady to tell him what his skill is. Luna touches Rudd and uses her support magic to identify 4 skills peculiar to Rudd. First is Provoke, next is a Healthy Body, Life Conversion, which allows Rudd to convert the Absorb shield he's depleted into strength so he can use it as an offensive attack. Finally, there's the Shield of Sacrifice, a skill that allows Rudd to treat the Absorb shields of his allies as his own. While protecting them, Rudd can take the damage of the others and take it as his own. Rudd suddenly understands why his values have been depreciating for so long. He's been taking on damage inflicted on his colleagues and exchanging them for value points all along. Rudd laughs about the realization and thanks Luna for the help. By dawn the next day, Rudd and Luna arrive in the small town of Avancia. Upon arriving at his sister's town, Rudd takes Luna on a little tour around the town to check out the clean and happy atmosphere of the people living there. As they walk through the town to his sister's place, a girl with red hair rushes towards him and hugs him tightly. The lady seemed to know Rudd, and as such, she was very fond of him. Soon after, another lady dressed as a knight walks over to Rudd and pulls the red-haired girl away from Rudd so he can have his body to himself. Rudd warms himself up to the company of both girls and greets them fondly. He then asks them what they were doing in their little village, and the red-haired lady tells him she's there to buy a hammer. As for the second lady, Phila, she tells Rude she's there on patrol, judging by her mode of dressing. Phila lets Rude know that she just got back from checking up on his little sister, Manikia, and tells him not to worry too much about her as she's doing pretty fine so far. Rude thanks Phila and the other townsfolk for helping him look out for his sister. While Phila tells him not to worry about it, the red-haired lady peers around and finds Luna hiding behind Rudd. She asks Rudd about her and finds out about Luna's personality. The red-haired girl feels sorry for Luna and decides to introduce herself to the little girl. She calls herself Milena, the blacksmith's poster girl, and then turns to Phila to introduce herself. Philly gets a little too shy and even fumbles around her words. Eventually, she introduces herself as the sub-leader for the town's watch. Rudd notices this and calls her out on her shyness. There's a little ruckus in the group, but everyone eventually ends up smiling at the cute Luna. Later on, Rudd arrives at his sister's place and finds all his favorite dishes already prepared and ready to be eaten. He takes a few steps forward and finally comes face to face with his sister, Manisha, who welcomes him back home to her. Without waiting for an answer from her brother, Manisha walks closer to her brother and outrightly asks him about Luna's identity. Rude is shocked at the answer, but then again, he's super psyched to see his little sister after a long while of being apart. He introduces Luna and her origins to his sister and allows the two of them to connect. In the meantime, he continues staring at his little sister, wondering just how beautiful she looks. After the proper introductions, Manisha takes them to her dinner table and urges them to eat from the food she cooked for them. Rude and Luna settle at the table to devour all the food Manisha made for them. Once they're done, Manisha heeds back to the kitchen to prepare seconds for them. Rude tries to discourage her from cooking too much food, but then again, Manikia isn't ready to stop cooking for her precious brother and his friend. So, she argues the facts with Rudd until he allows her to continue cooking. To lessen her stress, he joins to help her cook as well, and they all have a good time. Luna, who's been observing brother and sister argue, gets a little worried and asks Rude why Manisha's hair is always twitching and moving in odd directions. Rudd chuckles a little bit and tells her about Manisha's physical idiosyncrasy, a case that causes her hair to move according to her emotions. Rudd turns to his sister while she cooks and asks her how she knew he was coming home. Maybe it's her skill? Well, Manisha answers and tells him she just had a feeling that he was coming home that day. This melts Rude's heart so much that he tears up a little upon realizing just how much his little sis cares for him. At this point, Manisha gets very tired of his lovey-dovey appearance and insults him for it. Soon the food is ready, and they all settle down to dig in on the beautiful food. Luna gets down and eats the food voraciously, and even goes as far as holding the spoon wrongly. Manisha calls her out on it, and Luna gets very sullen for doing such a horrible thing. She gets up from her chair, goes on her knees, and begs Manisha to forgive her for her sins. She then moves on to explain how bad things were for her back when she was in captivity, telling them that she rarely had any chances to eat right back then. Manisha gets up from her chair and teaches Luna how to properly hold a spoon. She promises to teach her how to live like a human being and assures her not to worry about blending in. Over the next few days, Luna learns all there is to learn about cooking and being human. One morning, Luna takes to the kitchen and cooks up a nice breakfast meal for Rudd and his sister. Upon serving them, Rudd and Manisha both take bites from the food and are surprised by how delicious everything turns out to be. After eating, Manisha suggests showing Luna around town since the day looks pretty bright at the time. Rudd sees this as a great idea, so he seconds Manisha's claims. To help her blend into the crowd, Manisha gets up and walks into her room to get some clothes for little Luna to wear on her way out. Rudd, on the other hand, was pretty cheerful over his impending outing with Luna. As for Luna, our girl was scared shitless over what could happen outside. Seconds later, Manisha arrives with some of her best clothes and suggests changing for Luna, but then again, Luna gets very scared to show Mancia her bare skin. She takes the clothes and rushes to the empty room to change into her clothes. When she's done, she heads back outside and follows Rudd on their outing. Rudd shows her around for a few hours before running into Mr. Rysil, Milena's father. He stops by to listen to Rysil's rant about him marrying his daughter and introduces Luna as his friend to him. Moving on, he discusses making another sword with Rysil and hopes the blacksmith can do something about it for him. Rysil agrees to make something incredible for him to replace his former sword. Before leaving, he asks Rudd if he would allow Milena to work with him on the making of the sword. Rudd lets him know that it's completely okay for her to do so and promises to come back for the sword when the time is right. Rysil suggests that Rudd show Luna around the monstrous forest, where the monstrous vegetables and plants grow into monsters. Rudd decides it's also a good idea to show her around, so he takes her to the farm and explains a few facts about the plants to her. Shortly, two kids show up to bully Rudd emotionally. They mistake Luna to be his girlfriend, but then again, Rudd makes it clear to them that Luna is just a friend. One of the runts teases Rudd for caring too much about his sister and relates that to the reason why he doesn't have a girlfriend yet. Rudd gets pissed, but then takes it easy with the kids. Soon their supervisor shows up and chases them to get back to work. This manner of approach from the supervisor causes Luna to remember the horrible way in which she was treated back then. This causes her to freeze in her stance. The grandma supervisor from earlier, Grandma Gigi, shows up and finds Rudd with Luna, who is still frozen in place. Rudd calls her back to reality and introduces Luna to Gigi as their apothecary. Luna hides behind Rudd's back almost as if she is scared of the granny. However, the granny takes it as nothing and tells Luna to come visit her medicine shop anytime she needs something to heal something. To make things sweeter, she invites Luna to go spinach harvesting with her. Before Luna could answer, 3 other Knights patrols showed up to tease Rudd about bringing a girlfriend home. Rudd tells them all that Luna is his friend, and then they all blend in. Luna gets acquainted with the people and joins them to do some harvesting during the day. After getting a basket of fruit from the farm, Luna and Rudd head back home. On their way, Rudd apologizes for the incessant questions from the townsfolk, telling her not to think about what they all said too much. Luna assures him that she's good and then picks a piece of the yellow fruit from the basket to eat. She enjoys the fruit and appreciates how warm and kind the atmosphere around the town is. She wishes to stay there in the town forever so she can find true peace. However, she knows she can't stay there forever if she's still hiding her true self from her benefactor. With that, she takes Rudd's hands and places them on her chest. Rudd, who already knew what was there, pretended not to know anything. Luna reveals herself to be a battle homunculus that was developed in the neighboring nation to fight against them. With this, she sheds tears and apologizes for keeping things away from Rudd. Rudd stops her from crying and then tells her that he actually knew she was a homunculus, but he still chose to help her during her time of need. Surprised, Luna asks him why he would do such a thing, and Rudd tells her it's because she reminds him of himself and his sister back when they were younger. Luna reminds him of her identity and lets him know that it's a crime to help someone like her. Rudd still insists on keeping her with him and reasons with her logic a little bit. In the end, Luna gets very happy to live as a human and opts to do so by shaking hands with Rudd and calling him master. That evening, Luna reveals her true self to Minichia and clears her name. Minichia asks if she would continue being her friend, and Luna happily tells her she's going to be her BFF. As Luna hugs her, Minichia turns to her brother and appreciates his efforts towards making sure Luna is taken care of. Later that day, Luna and the others get to a mansion to help clean it up. Soon, Minichia shows up with some tea she specially made and serves it to her people. Every dude, including her brother, runs up to her and grabs a cup before gulping it down. Following that, they discuss a few more random things, and Minichia ends up letting her brother know that she can handle herself. Shortly afterward, one of the cleaner guys challenges Rudd to a duel. Rudd, however, challenges Phil to a 1v1 to be a good opportunity for him to test his strength. Phil accepts the challenge and gets outside with Rudd to fight him. When the fight begins, the two remain silent for about 20 seconds. Then, Phil makes the first move and hits Rudd's shield continuously. Rudd blocks all of her attacks with his absorb shield and ends up losing battle points on the go. Eventually, the two of them get to a standstill and Rudd gets distracted when Luna calls for him from the audience. Phil notices this and takes advantage of the opening and attacks Rudd without fail. Rudd takes the hit and gets off balance. Phil sees this as her chance to attack him and walks in blindly. To her surprise, Rudd wasn't helpless as he used his other power, life conversion, to tip her off balance. Thus ends their bouts, and both warriors shake hands like mature warriors before calling it a day. Rudd looks to the crowd and asks for any other challenger. Most of them run like cowards, with the rest of them flocking around the proud Rudd. As for Manisha, she gets a little sad over her illness and recalls the terrible things she's been forced to pass through as a kid. Suddenly, she wakes up in the middle of the night and smiles at her big brother's love for her. However, she does get curious and starts thinking about the impact of her illness on her brother's life. Is he living his life the same way he sees fit? Or is he just sacrificing everything to save her life? Manisha wonders. The following morning, Manisha wakes up as early as possible to get things done around the house. Rudd wakes up shortly after and gets downstairs to greet his sister, who he found making breakfast. Rudd tries to talk to her, but then again, Manisha was acting strange that morning, almost as if she didn't want to have anything to do with him, or maybe he did something wrong. Before Rudd could say a thing, Luna came downstairs distraught and sad for waking up late. She gets down the stairs and begs for everyone's forgiveness for waking up late before cooking breakfast. To her surprise, she finds the table filled with food and thanks Manisha for helping her. Apparently, Luna wasn't a morning person, so it was pretty understandable that she'd wake up pretty late for breakfast. Nevertheless, Luna struggles to keep his hair together, but then again, Rudd lets her know that he's there for her and would always help her out with anything she feels she can't do well. Luna gets interested in the paper Rudd is reading and gets very interested in becoming knowledgeable like Rudd and his sister, Manisha. Rudd tells her about the apprenticeship he and Manisha passed through back when they were in the slums, and lets her know that they learned everything they know now from that single apprenticeship. Luna thanks them for giving her the life she always wanted, but then asks Rudd to tell her more about the apprenticeship. Back then, the kind nobles of the kingdom organized an educational program for the slum rats to help them get out of the slum mentality and also enable them to take on positions with high regard and status. Most of the slum kids were sent to night school to train hard enough to become guardians of the nation. Manisha, upon hearing everything her brother was telling Luna, flashes back to one of the terrible things she's heard people gossiping about her and her illness. She gets lost in thought for quite a while until her brother, Rudd, brings her back to reality. After getting her attention, Rudd asks Manisha to tell him if she needs anything later that day as he's heading to town soon. For some context into why Manisha feels so bad about her illness, a flashback is shown to illustrate what happened when Manisha and Rudd were still students. Back then, Manisha would hide behind the shadow of her brother and watch everyone fondle him as the star student of the entire school. Everyone had very high hopes for Rudd, and most would never expect what happened to him later on. One day in school, Manisha leaves her brother's side for an empty part of the school building. There, she finds 3 girls gossiping about her and her brother, Rudd. The wimps were complaining about Manisha's terminal illness and relating it to the reason why Rudd joined the academy. They were mad about Rudd basing his life decisions on saving his sister alone and not enjoying himself or something. Or better still, being with clowns like them. Manisha gets the gist and returns to her quarters thinking her brains out over such minuscule issues. Even after the flashback, Luna still finds Manisha thinking hard about the gossip. She sits on her bed and asks for pointers about what's making her sad. Luna apologizes for not being there for her and asks for some more information about whatever's happening to her. After getting her attention, Manisha finally speaks up and narrates the entire thing to her. Apparently, she thinks she's the sole reason why her big brother has been forced to live a restricted life. Luna, after hearing all that Manisha had to say, admits to being alone for most of her life. However, she tells Manisha to consider talking to Rudd so she can find out how he truly feels about the entire thing. From what she can tell, Rudd is quite different from the others in terms of his caring and thought. His rescuing her is proof enough of him being different. Manisha considers following Luna's advice, but then again, she gets confused as she doesn't know how to interact with Rudd. Just then, her skill tingles and she realizes that Rudd is on his way back home from his outing. She fiddles all around the room wondering what to do at the time. Thankfully, Luna calms her down and encourages her to talk to him. Shortly after, Manisha requests an audience with her brother and Luna. After getting everyone's attention, Manisha fumbles over what she's to say. Luna holds her hand and gives her the necessary encouragement to speak her heart out. Manisha starts by asking her brother if he truly loves the kind of life he's living at the moment. Rudd lets her know that he loves his life, This makes her a little uneasy, but eventually, she asks him why he stayed back to help her back when her illness was getting the best of her. Rudd smiles and tells her it's because she's saved him before. Surprised, Manisha asks him to clarify his claims. Rudd brings her memory back to when they were toddlers. Back then, Rudd had a disability that made him bigger than other kids his age. As a result, many kids would run away from him, so he doesn't end up hurting them in the process. The only person who stayed by his side back then was his little sister, Manisha. Back then, Manisha would go out of her way to play with Rudd, so he wouldn't end up being alone. Rudd tells her that this single act of kindness is the sole reason why he can't bring himself to abandon Manisha when she needs him the most. According to him, he's his happiest whenever he's with her. Upon hearing these words, Manisha tears up and apologizes for concluding for him. Rudd tells her not to worry about being awkward towards him, as he can be a little awkward at times. With this, Manisha hugs her brother and returns to her normal self. To conclude the brief meeting, Rudd and Manisha thanked Luna for nudging Manisha in the right direction. Embarrassed, Luna rushes out of the room and gets to the kitchen to get dinner or lunch for the family. After she's gone, Rudd and his sister hear someone knock on the door. They answer the door and are shocked to find Nin there on the other side. Surprised, Rudd asks Nin how she managed to get permission from the douchebag, Kyglas, to come to his part of town. Nin narrates what happened to Rudd and leaves flabbergasted over the results of his absence. Ever since he left, there was nobody to defend their team and take up their damage as they were being hit. So, the team got more tacky and Kyglas was too dumb to realize why. During one of their missions in the Labyrinth, Kyglas and his colleagues lose a large chunk of their absorb shield. And with Kyglas getting confused about the entire thing, portals begin forming around them. And before they know it, more monsters join the show. Kyglas tries using his infamous life burst powers to nullify the enemy. However, he couldn't get much energy to make a proper one as his magic values were too low. He suddenly realizes that the tank of their team, Rudd, was the person helping them all along. Adamant in his clear thoughts, Kyglas raises his sword and uses all his energy to create a life burst attack powerful enough to slash down one of the enemies. After defeating just one enemy, his people advise him to return to the lower floors for the rest of the attacks, so they don't end up getting killed by the monsters. Kyglas, being Kyglas, forbids his people from forfeiting their fight. He charges in alone and tries to use his life burst one more time to take down the next monster. Thankfully, his power was already too low to get it done. The monster catches up to him and destroys what's left of his shield. At this point, Kyglas got scared for his life and began to run frantically. The monster caught up to him and broke a few more of his bones before preparing his final attack. Lucky for the douchebag, his team members opted in to save him from imminent death as they picked Kyglas and teleported him out of the labyrinth. As if the horrible experience wasn't bad enough for him, Kyglas still blamed his team members for their failure. Nin, who's about had enough of his bullshit, stands up to him and accuses him of slacking off at training. Ever since Rudd has left, there's been nobody to absorb damage for him. As such, Kyglas's magic values deplete way quicker before he gets to use his flimsy life burst. Even after getting all the facts tabled out before him, Kyglas still refused to take the blame for his failure. This irritated Nin and the others, so they left the team altogether. Kyglas promised to get his revenge on them all for quitting on him during his worst times. After hearing all that happened, Rudd tells Nin about the new things he learned from his powers, and apologizes for not identifying his skills from the get-go. With this, Nin returns to her normal self and asks Rudd to do the same. Seconds later, Manisha and Luna show up to say hi. Nin introduces herself as Rudd's former colleague and promises to stick around for a while before heading back to the city. On hearing this, Rudd gets a little worried and tries to tell her about the inns in their town. Manisha suggests Nin stay at their place in the meantime, and she immediately agrees to the offer. Rudd takes Manisha to a secret part of the room and tells her about Nin's secret identity, which is being a saint, and he feels their house may not be up to par with what she's used to. Nin, however, tells him to kill the idea and rushes towards his room to stay in for the meantime. She jumped on the bed and hugged the pillow as tightly as she could. Then, she raised her legs just a little bit higher to entice Rudd into falling for her. Rudd, on the other hand, lets her know that he'll be sleeping on the couch in the living room, and this makes Nin a little sad. She lets Rudd know that she doesn't mind sharing the same bed with him. Rudd gets a little weirded out and asks her to stop the act. Nin gets up from the bed and blushingly tells Rudd that she's being serious about her claims. There's a little silence in the room that gets interrupted by Philae, who was rushing in to get Rudd to see something. Apparently, a monster had appeared in the orchard and threatened to end the knights present on the field. Rudd immediately left his house and got to the orchard to find and fight the monster with Luna and Nin. On getting there, they have the shock of their lives as they find a weird monster covered in a purple-black miasma. Nin tries to purge the monster, but then again, that doesn't help out at all. Rudd begins to take the monster seriously and wonders if the issue is from its magic essence. Just then, a knight sneaks behind the monster and tries to attack it. The monster pushed him away and came at him to end him. Rudd uses his provoke magic spell to make the monster face him. He stands his ground and defends against the monster's attacks, all while leaving an opening for the other to attack it. The monster showcased impressive moves to evade most of their attacks. The soldiers take enough damage, and this depletes Rudd's powers for a bit. After getting healed up by Luna and Nin, Rudd gets back to normal and tells the soldiers to keep attacking the monster while they still can. Without further ado, they manage to irritate the monster till it turned back and tried to run. To prevent it from coming back, Luna uses her wall powers to stop the monster, and Rudd ends up using his life conversion, which takes the damage he's accumulated and returns it to the enemy as offensive power to destroy the monster. After the fight, the lead knight walks up to Rudd and thanks him for helping destroy the monster with the devilish miasma. After closely inspecting the animal's corpse, they find out that it's a C-rank black wolf. However, they get a little confused as to why such a wolf would be this powerful. To answer their question, Luna shows them the 2 magic crystals present on the chest of the wolf. This can only mean one thing. Someone from the Homunculi Company is manipulating these animals and fixing magic stones inside them to make them much stronger than usual. They get to sleep that night as heroes of the land and wake up the next day with curious minds. Rudd checks out the morning paper, hoping to find any information on the news about the monster they took down the previous day. After searching and finding nothing, Rudd places the paper down and takes a moment to think about the 2 magic stones he found on the creature's chest. Soon after, Manikia shows up unannounced and sits on her big brother's lap, throws a fuss, and asks his sister to get off his leg politely. Manikia makes a cute face to him and brings down his defenses. Eventually, Rude is forced to lap his sister so she can enjoy herself. Manisha garners enough interest in the paper her big brother is reading and asks him to read some of the text there to her. Along the line, he catches an article talking about Keeglis's latest raid on the Labyrinth alone. Manisha recognizes the name and asks her brother about it. She also makes sure to mention how much Nin hates the douchebag and lets him know that she hates him just as much. Rudd admits to Nin's personal feelings, and this gets Rudd a little startled. Manisha, who's surprised her brother's smart enough to notice Nin's feelings for him, asks him why he hasn't made his move yet. Rudd holds her shoulders and tells her that it's because he doesn't want to end up being clingy to the beautiful saint, as he knows himself to be a weak person when it comes to keeping relationships and stuff. After hearing him spill out the cap from his mouth, Manisha assures her brother that he'll be fine, but then again, she beseeches him to never forget about her if he eventually finds someone he can call his own. Rudd takes one last look at his sis and promises to never abandon her when she needs him the most. Later that day, Philae calls some adventurers from the local guild to help hunt down the chameleon Kong creature that they found roaming around the orchards not too long ago. Now, the chameleon Kongs are creatures that live far south of their land, but to think one of them made it to Avantia is just mind-boggling. So, they have to nip the problem in the bud and investigate the chameleon Kongs as quickly as possible before they turn the orchards into their breeding grounds. Moreover, it's likely such a monster came from the labyrinth that just appeared, and if they're not properly managed, things may turn out to be far worse than expected. Shortly after the speech, one of the people there noticed the impressive new sword that Mr. Racel and his daughter had made for Rudd. Rudd's new sword grants him the ability to pour out all his magic powers into the magic stone's mana on the sword to create fire powerful enough to ignite the sword and turn it into a fire-type sword. Rudd does an impressive display of his powers to the lot and manages to get impressive nods from the people there. However, one of the C-rank dudes there throws a jab at Rudd and insults him for being an F-rank dude using a good sword. According to his deranged thoughts, Rudd's sword is entirely useless in his hands, and he shouldn't be allowed to use such a sword. He even goes as far as telling a big guy like Rudd to head back home and cry in his bed. This pisses Luna off way more than Rudd, as it normally should anybody. She throws a fuss and tries to defend her boss. Rudd, however, advises her to keep calm and just let the guy be. He would rather be underestimated than be overestimated, so he's pretty cool with the little doofus with a loud mouth. Amid the discussion, Nin speaks up and bashes Rudd for not allowing a saint like her to name him a knight. This shocks the little doofus so much that he gets closer to Nin to confirm if she is telling the truth. Nin tells him she's even tired of the big guy and wishes he would just let her give him the rank he deserves. The little doofus turns to Rude and asks him why he chooses to remain at F rank. Rude tells them it's because he doesn't want the guild to summon him too much, so he can have time for his little sister. Just then, a chameleon Kong shows up and attacks everyone on sight. The soldiers were thankfully quick on their feet, so most of them could block the Kong's attacks on time. Rud takes charge and uses his provoke spell to turn the Kong's attention towards himself. As he blocks his attacks, the others sneak up behind the Kong and attack it with all they've got. Everyone kept fighting the Kong like there was nothing wrong. However, Rud could sense something very off with this chameleon Kong, almost as if it was trying to act like a human tank like him. When the time is right, the Kong summons 2 others of his kind and ends up surrounding them all. The soldiers are pinched in the middle of 3 huge gorillas with nowhere to go. Phila, the leader of the task force, gets cold feet and ponders over what she's to do in the meantime. Rud notices this and gets closer to her so he can speak some sense into her head as the leader of the forces. Thankfully, Phila gets her strength back and muscles up enough of her power to shield the 3 Kong and come up with a plan to save her people from the terrible monsters. After getting a good plan, Rud uses his provoke spell to turn the 3 gorillas' attention to him. While diverting them, Luna uses his wind shot to slash the Kong's back. Then, before his friends notice he's gone, they rain all their attacks on that Kong. Rud faces the other Kong and remembers a certain fact he used to know about the chameleon Kongs, which is their weakness to fire. He enchants his sword and uses a fire attack to weaken the Kong. Phil quickly gets on the weakened Kong before it gets back to its usual self and ends it ASAP. Then, she raises her sword and tells the guards to finish it off, while they deal with the last one. As for the last one, it kept attacking Rud and his shield as hard as it could. Poor Duty was angry about his friends and wanted to take revenge. Lucky for Rud, Luna was strong. So, after getting him in the right place, she works together with Nin to hold the Kong down so Rud can use his fire sword to attack and take down the last chameleon Kong. After their fierce battle, everyone praises Rud for helping them take down the chameleon Kong. Little Doofus from earlier walks back to the crowd and sees Rud doing the Lord's work. He gets sober and apologizes for speaking shitty things about Rud and his strength before the fight. Rud, who's the cool and mature guy in the room, tells him not to worry too much about things and lets him know that his behavior is normal, seeing as anyone would easily talk down on an F-rank soldier. Pretty cool guy. Seconds after saying such amazing words, the chameleon Kongs around them melt into nothing like the Black Wolf from earlier, exposing their magic stones. Shortly afterward, someone points to a labyrinth entrance and makes Rud worry about what is up. That day, everyone gets back home and drinks to the appearance of a labyrinth entrance somewhere like Avansha. While the party goes on, Luna asks Manisha for some information about why labyrinth entrances are so crucial to a town. Manisha tells her it's because such an appearance helps slow down the population decline in their little town. As mentioned earlier, the materials and magic stones obtained from creatures in a labyrinth are sure to skyrocket the economy of Avansha without fail. Rud shows up shortly, looking worried and unhappy. The little doofus from earlier tries to hit on Manisha with her big brother there with her. You can only guess what happened after that. Well, if you're wondering, Rud left to drink with them. After he's gone, Nin shows up to check up on Luna. After exchanging pleasantries, Luna asks Nin why Rud appears sad that night. Nin tells her it's probably because of the problems that come with the labyrinth, as he fears that everyone may try to recruit him to be the knight and leader of a party, which is something he would never want at the time. When asked why he would be sent to lead a party, Nin tells her about Rud's strength and names him the best candidate to be a clan leader. Luna gets even more confused and asks for some clarity in her words. At that point, Rud shows up and explains the concept of clans to Luna and Nin. He also makes sure to mention just how important clans are to the development of a particular nation, and also tells Luna that an entire country can fall without a clan to support it. Before they can finish their discussion, Phyllis shows up drunk and half-clothed and dunks herself on poor Rud, who is just worried about his sister. Thankfully, she doesn't deal too much damage, and everyone goes to sleep peacefully that other night. The next morning, Rud finds 2 delinquents fighting in the middle of the street. He tries speaking some sense into them and shows them his fist. Thankfully, the guys get the memo and they run back to normal. Soon, Nin joins Rud in the patrol and continues moving through the town work. Along the way, Rud gets thanked by the happy townsfolk for helping them take down the monsters from the labyrinth earlier. Soon enough, Rud and Nin get called to witness another fight happen in front of everybody. Rud gets there and finds 2 clan leaders, Girly and Boo, trying to fight for who gets to stay in the town and take over as the best adventurers there. Rud intrudes on their party and lets them know that the town is fine with neither clowns. Sorry, clan. One of the clan members tries to attack Rud and Nin, but then the strongest warriors show them who's boss. In the end, they end up apologizing for their unruliness. One of them tried to recruit Rud to become their clan member, but then again, Rude wasn't joining any clan anytime soon. He welcomes them all to Avancia and lets them settle into their new life. Rude realizes at that point that he won't be leaving Avancia anytime soon, especially when it's like this. Soon, someone comes rushing to him and informs him about Mr. Voold's summon. Rudd gets to Voold's mansion ASAP and grants him the audience he needs. There, Voold presents him with two options. One, he creates a clan and becomes its leader so he can manage the labyrinth and the creatures inside. Or two, he destroys the labyrinth altogether to avoid things from going out of control. According to Vild, the capital can't manage the excessive labyrinths appearing all over the country anymore. Either the town does something about it, or they destroy it to prevent things from going out of control. Rudd leaves the meeting thinking about what to do. On his way home, he runs into another set of doofuses fighting and tries to stop them. Before he could, Luna rushes over to inform Rudd about his sister's failing health. Rudd gets back home and finds out his sister was just having a high fever. This sight made him change his mind to destroy the labyrinth. He calls for a meeting with Luna and Nin. There, he explains his plan to destroy the labyrinth so he can get more time to spend with his sister. Luna, however, gives him another idea to ease his troubles. If he creates a clan and manages the labyrinth, then he can place her, a homunculus, in charge of the clan while he worries about his sister. Rudd gets a little worried about what he's to do. However, Nin assured him not to worry too much about things, and that she would be there to support Luna and himself through it all. Eventually, she tells Rudd to do what he can to make his sister survive. Soon, Manisha walks up to her big brother and tells her brother to be the protector of the town so he can stop worrying about her. Although Rudd could see her legs shaking, he changed his mind and became the town's sole protector. Later that day, Rudd heads into town with his new subordinates, Nin and Luna, keeping close to him as his protectors. As he strides pridefully around town, Rudd recalls the details of his meeting with Nin and Luna, moments after getting the go-ahead from his sister. Encouraged by his friends, Rudd now feels the need to save both Manisha, his sister, and the town of Avancia as a whole. He promises to conquer the labyrinth so he can make all his dreams come true without fail. To do this, he gets down to creating a clan of seasoned warriors to help him on his conquest. However, while he's at it, he gets summoned by some other adventurers exploring the Avancia labyrinth, his old party members to be precise. On getting there, Rudd meets his former colleagues who reintroduce themselves as Lilia and Lily, the incredulous twin sisters with immense power, and the church knight Sugol, who's dressed like a priest from the 90s. Luna awkwardly introduces herself after meeting Rudd's former colleagues, and this makes everyone chuckle a little bit at her cuteness. After the necessary introductions, Rudd sees himself into their tent, which was situated behind the crew, and finds someone he'd never expect to see that day, Kyglass. Yup, turns out, Kyglass was already sober from his nefarious and prideful acts, and wanted to apologize to Rudd for throwing him out of the party in his way. Nin, upon seeing the one person she hates, walks forward and chastises the injured and bandaged Kyglass for having to summon Rudd for a meeting after the horrible way he was disgraced and thrown out of the party. Rudd stops her from saying way too many bad things to Kyglass and steps up to face the man who caused him the greatest embarrassment ever. He asks Kyglass to go straight to the point and avoid beating around the bush. Kyglass puts his head on the ground and tells Rudd about the monster they faced the previous day during one of their exploits in the labyrinth. Apparently, they were attacked by a sentient guardian and had to sustain the brunt of an angry guardian. Though the guardian seemed humanoid, Kyglass confesses to not being able to relate freely with it. As such, he paid the price of losing a limb from his body. At this point, Kyglass bows his head down in shame and humbly grants the exploration of the labyrinth to Rudd. Rudd is a little shocked at this realization, but then again, Kyglass is pretty sober from his wrongdoings, so he embarrassingly asks Rudd to finish the mission for him. Lilia and Lily get pretty funky about his doings and embarrass him a little bit. Eventually, Kyglass reminds Rudd about the secret treasure of the labyrinth that he needs to cure his sister and lets him know just how much Rudd helped him back when they used to be together at the same party. This touches Rudd so much that he immediately takes on the job and borrows Sugol, Lilia, and Lily for the job. Before letting him leave, Kyglass stops Rudd and apologizes fully for making him pass through such hard situations under his watch. Rudd accepts his apologies and promises to personally take down the Guardian and bring honor to the party. With this, he sets out to the Avancia labyrinth with his new party of warriors and magicians. As they near the entrance of the labyrinth, Rudd encourages his team to muscle up and march forward with courage so they can take on the sentient Guardian and get things back to normal. Shortly after entering the labyrinth, Rudd and his team find a magic circle and step on it to be teleported to the first floor of the labyrinth. On getting there, Luna is surprised to see such a large area hiding in such a labyrinth. After complimenting the sun and the outer-worldly nature of the room, Rudd warns her not to be deceived by the stagnant sun and the rich vegetation as time and space are usually warped inside the labyrinth. As such, things happen there as if they were nothing. Around that time, the magic circle under them disappears and Luna complains about it. Thankfully, Nin's ability, Dungeon Walk, is coming in clutch, and she explains the extent to which the thing works. Apparently, Nin can use her Dungeon Walk ability to teleport a maximum of just 6 people to another room or location within the labyrinth, and she lets Luna know about it. After listening to her mentor talk about her ability, Nin decides to show Luna an emergency exit spell. Luna decides to try the spell out and gets it amazingly well on her first try. Shortly after that, 3 chameleon Kongs show up to attack the lot. Before they get to them, Rudd stations his warriors to man their positions so they can get the absolute attack and defense formation against the beasts. Rude places Lilia and Sugol at the front, Nin and Lily at the back for support and healing, with Luna placed at the middle position where she can protect everyone. Once everyone's in position, Rude uses his Provoke spell to turn one of the chameleon Kong against him. Sugol, on the other hand, uses his shield to protect the others against the second one. And as for the last, Lilia takes charge in the attack. Together, Rudd gets his team to do his bidding and take down the chameleon Kongs in time. While all this happens, the sentient guardian of that labyrinth watches everything happen from his little space on the 10th floor of the labyrinth. He judges both the team and individual strength of Rudd and his team members to see whether they're strong enough to take him on. Thankfully, he likes them and hopes for them to make it to the 10th floor so he can fight them. Rudd and his guys don't disappoint as well as they progress from floor to floor, meeting dangerous animals like the field Zorus that almost took them out. Rudd makes sure he and his team hold the monsters long enough to find the emergency magic circle they can use to get out of the location and progress to the next floor. They use this same strategy to advance to the next floor, up until they get to the 9th floor. With only 1 floor left till they meet the final creep boss, Rudd and his team make sure to preserve as much strength as possible so they don't fall like chickens when they meet the sentient guardian. On the 9th floor, Rudd and his guys decide to take a breather to rest from the stress so far. Amid that, Rudd gets very sober and apologizes to his people for putting them through such tough situations for selfish reasons. Surprised by his apology, Nin and the others make Rudd know that it's their pleasure to help him out with his sister, and he should never think they'd leave him otherwise. With this, they pull Rudd to the magic circle and advance to the 10th floor with him. On getting to the 10th floor, Rudd and his guys are greeted by the sentient guardian, who applauds them for being strong enough for him to fight. He welcomes them to the labyrinth and makes an impressive display of lightning and thunder before telling the group his name, which turns out to be Marius. After hearing his name, Rudd complains about the guardian being on the 5th floor, but then Marius tells them he had to wait on the 10th floor so he wouldn't have to hold back to fight them. With lightning and thunder ravaging the skies around them, Marius promises to show them his full strength. Seconds later, he takes out his sword and lunges at Rudd, who blocks his attack. Marius is a little too impressed at Rudd's block, so he decides to show him the full extent of his power. Rudd tries to speak some sense into his head, but then again, Marius is already too far gone. He gets on his knees and summons his purple miasma to come to defend his devilish self. Rudd coordinates some attacks with his team and launches a series of attacks on Marius, who makes sure to block most of them. After defending himself from their pesky attacks, Marius decides to morph into his true form, and he does so without fail. In just a few seconds, the handsome devil called Marius transforms into a clothed skeleton with immense powers. He attacks Rude with everything he has and ends up depleting a good deal of power from his shield. Soon, Lilia and Lily take turns attacking Marius. After dodging a few hits from the monster, Sugol steps in and substitutes himself for Rude before taking him down. Sugol takes a few hits and gets his Absorb shield reduced down to 900. Rudd sees this and changes his strategy of attack and defense. This time, the attack works just fine according to Lily and Lilia's plan from back then. From then on, it becomes a battle of endurance and courage to fight to the end. Luna almost breaks character, but with a little nudge in the right direction from Lily, she amps up her powers and fights the monster with all she's got. Rudd takes advantage of this, and uses his life conversion skill to transform all the damage he's received so far into a large and powerful attack. This didn't seem to do much damage, but then again, Rudd still believed that Marius would fall to another attack. To his surprise, however, Marius sheds his old skin and destroys it to keep fighting his enemies. Lilia faints from exhaustion and Sugol gets hit by Marius again. This makes Rude rethink his decisions and team. Eventually, he decides their lives are not worth the risk and advises them to retreat. This comes as a shock to Nin that she steps up and speaks some sense into Rudd's head. Soon enough, Sugol shows up and strengthens his resolve to fight to the death alongside Rude and the others, even if it means losing his life. Rudd gets so emotional and encouraged to fight for his people that he begs them all to help him out. Lilia and Lily fuse into one person, Lily, and shower Marius's large body with attacks from their sword. Nin and Luna also join to make sure they weaken Marius well enough for Rude to land a successful attack. Soon after, Rudd gets his opening and uses another life conversion spell, which seems to do nothing. Marius uses the same momentum to return the damage to Rudd. Rudd takes the damage and immediately uses it to take down Marius in one final attack. After the attack, Marius is forced back to his normal self. He admits to defeat, sits down, and waits for Rude to end him. Rudd, however, gets on his knees and asks Marius for the secret treasure of the labyrinth said to grant any wish. Marius reaches into his pocket, takes a small magic stone, and gives it to Rudd. Rudd collects the stone and promises to get it to the right person when the time comes. After granting him his wish, Marius asks Rude to end him as he should. Instead, Rudd extends a hand for friendship and tells Marius to continue watching over the labyrinth while he does the hunting. Marius accepts his hand and promises to get things done accordingly. That evening, Rudd returns home and gives Manisha the magic stone to heal herself up. Manisha tries to be modest, but then again, Rudd tells her to use it for herself, as she's the only reason why he was there in the first place. With this, Manisha gets the stone and uses its power to wish healing for herself. When the deed is done, Manisha gets back her strength and jumps around the room like a happy little girl. Rudd gets very teary and he hugs his sister, who's now more whole than ever. In the end, Manisha thanks her elder brother for the help and wishes nothing but the best for him. The next morning, Marius visits Rudd out of the blue and names him the next guardian of the new labyrinth in Avancia. Shocked at this, Rudd ignores Marius's request to name him the next guardian of the new labyrinth in Avancia and heads over into town to check the adventurers out. On getting there, Rudd gets another shock hit when he finds dozens of adventurers scattered in the street and arguing over hunting the Fieldosaurus monster that lives in the labyrinth. He complains a little about how troublesome things have gotten and starts thinking of a possible solution to this problem. Just then, Boo and Girly, both leaders of the Black Dragon Fang and the White Tiger Claw, show up to welcome their party leader, Rudd. They reason with the stress Rudd was forced to face in dealing with these adventurers, and then ask him if he needs their help settling some things. Rudd appreciates their offer and asks them to help him do something that's left unsaid. With this, Rudd returns to his safe house and finds Nin sitting in the lobby eating something censored. Nin notices the sad look on Rudd's face and asks him if he is okay. Rudd confirms that he is, and Nin moves on to talk about the benefits of the Fieldosaurus monsters on the town's economy. After naming quite a few, it becomes clear why everyone would want a Fieldosaurus carcass anytime soon. To keep things in order, Nin mentions that they will need more people in their clan to manage it all. Rudd concurs with her thoughts and mentions a few valid candidates to be put in charge of managing the clan. Currently, Manisha handles the paperwork for the clan. Lilia has no experience whatsoever teaching people how to fight. However, she did suggest they form an alliance with another clan in the last meeting Rudd had with her. This alliance, however, has to be won on equal footing with the new clan. And to do this, Rudd has to get something beneficial to offer the clan so they won't try to push being the leading clan. Judging by how few they are in their current clan, Rudd has to figure something out so they don't get thrown under the bus. Currently, all they have to offer is combat strength, and Rudd makes it known to Nin that they need a manager ASAP to appear like a real clan to the other stronger and bigger ones. Nin is pretty impressed with Rudd's hard work and tells him that the clan might blow up and become a big clan in no time. Rather than concur and celebrate with her, Rudd notices the disappointed look on Nin's face and asks her about it. To his surprise, Nin blurts out something he'd never expected her to say. She tells Rudd she's disappointed because she won't have her alone time with him anymore, and this is way worse to her than getting disbanded from the clan. Upon hearing all these words from Rudd, his face goes red with embarrassment, and Nin asks him to use her for the clan's promotion if the situation warrants it. Rudd knows that's going to be a bad idea, and he forbids that from ever happening. Nin gets very shy and tries to mouth out some words, but then again, Marius shows up for the second time that day and asks Rude to manage the labyrinth again. Rude refuses yet again and tells him he's too busy taking care of the labyrinth in town. Marius asks if he could join the clan and help manage it, but then again, Rudd remains skeptical and asks Marius about his hatred for humans. Marius lets him know that the hatred for humans is non-existent, so there's no issue with him handling them while he manages the labyrinth. At this point, Rudd had no choice, as he also needed a member desperately. He succumbs to Marius's wishes and tells him to take him to the labyrinth so he can learn how to manage one. Marius happily takes Rudd to the labyrinth so they can get started on how to manage one. On getting to the labyrinth, Rudd finds several adventurers staying at the entrance and gets confused. Marius calls him somewhere secret and opens a portal that takes both of them to the control room of the entire labyrinth. In just a few seconds, Rude appears there in Maruis's living space and begins learning the ropes around managing a labyrinth. Marius shows him the control system, which has about 530 points allocated to it, and explains how to get the points updated. He tells Rudd to use the monsters he's going to create with the points to decrease the absorb shield of the adventurers, and also make sure to replicate the monsters from time to time so their numbers don't get too low to handle. He also shows Rudd the controls to change the labyrinth's construction. From everything he's heard from Marius, Rudd asks if the control system will gain more points if his absorb shield gets hit. Marius gives his suggestion a thought and decides to try it out. To test their theory out, Marius replicates a goblin somewhere within the labyrinth and takes it to the adventurers. The goblin ends up scaring everybody, and Rudd scolds Marius for doing that. Moving on, Rudd asks Marius if he could replicate other monsters aside from the goblins. Marius tells him he actually can, and then shows him a list of monsters he could replicate that instant. He also tells Rude to try building a bond of trust with the monsters so they can help him in time of need. Following that, Marius presses a button on the interface and shows Rude an ultra-rare Kitsune monster. Rudd gets shocked over how many points such a monster costs and asks if something could be done about it. After chuckling and teasing Rudd, Marius shows him the raffle draw system and explains how to get random monsters, including the rares ones, from there. Marius steps aside and asks Rudd to try out his luck. Rudd gets close to the system and taps on the raffle machine. Just then, a cute little slime monster surfaces from the small lake of creation in front of him and instantly takes a liking to Rudd. With such new information in his hands, Rudd starts making plans to create S-rank monsters to up the value of the labyrinth. To him, keeping the number of monsters spawned at the labyrinth to the barest minimum is key to keeping the adventurers coming. The slime notices Rudd ignoring it and attacks him in the chest to punish him for that. Then, it walks towards Rudd, who is lying on the ground and puts on a cute look for him to forgive it. Rudd pets the slime and accepts Marius's request at long last. He promises to also think of things to put in the labyrinth to attract more adventurers. Everything seems pretty fine with Marius, so he gives Rudd the go-ahead. As for the slime monster, Marius gives it to Rudd and asks him to take it with him when he leaves. Rudd ends his session with Marius and heads back home to meet his people. On getting home, he finds Luna and Banished together and introduces the slime to them. Initially, both of them get scared and defensive over handling the thing, but eventually they warm up to their new pet and treat it as their own. Suddenly, Menecia starts touching it and is taken aback by how cute it is. When the time came to give Slime a name, Rudd stuttered over what to say. Luna gets a little curious and asks Rudd why he's struggling to get a name for their new pet, when he didn't struggle that much when giving her name. It was then that Banished spilled the beans and outrightly told Luna that Rudd only chose that name for her because he was holding a Lunafia petal. This makes Luna a little annoyed at the thought, but then again, Rudd thought of Lime and named the slime monster Lime. A few hours later, both Boo and Girly return to their clan stronghold to report their findings to their masters. They also make sure to discuss the alliance Rudd wanted to form with them so they can get their replies. Upon listening to everything Boo had to say, the assistant head of the clan outrightly tells him to reject the offer. The clan leader tells him to wait a little bit before rejecting the offer. At that time, the leader of Girly's clan simultaneously commends Rudd's prowess at the time and tells their servant to invite Rudd to their ball, which is taking place very soon. Several days after receiving the invitation, Rudd and his people all arrive at the town of Kield. Firstly, Rudd thanks Lilia and Lily for coming to the town with them, and then blends in with his people so they can get acquainted with the feel of the town. Marius notices the 2 sealed envelopes in Rude's hands and asks him about it. Some days back, after receiving the envelopes, Rudd showed them to his people and told them they were letters from the 2 greatest clans in all of the land. While Luna and Manisha fawn over the thought of being invited to a ball, Nin sees right through their plans and asks Rudd for an explanation. Rudd lets them know that their request for an alliance has been cancelled. Not only that, the great clans gave them a condition if they wanted to ally. For starters, Rudd and his party will have to serve under them and also surrender the popular saint Nin to them for their use. This isn't something that would sit well with Rudd at all, but then again, he makes Nin know that he isn't going to force her into doing anything. Nin asks him what he would do if she wished him to stop her from joining the other clans, and Rudd tells her that he's going to go with her wish and stop her from joining the other clans at all costs. This makes Nin smile a little bit, and she allows the meeting to continue. Rudd moves on to tell his people to be warned of the dangers that lie ahead. Even still, he mentions just how important it is for him to keep to his true intentions and make sure he discusses with the 2 clan leaders. With this, Marius speaks up for the first time since the meeting started. He mentions an important fact about Kield, the land they were traveling to, and tells them that he found another sentient guardian at the Kield Labyrinth just like him. Rudd and the others were a little surprised at this, but then they took it into account. Rudd thinks about finding another magic stone in the labyrinth and using it to further cure his sister's illness. Besides, Nin heard somewhere that the two great clans had only managed to make it to the 50th floor and had not been able to advance any further. On hearing this, Rudd recounts the strong members of his team and eventually realizes that they're strong enough to go on an adventure in the Keeled Labyrinth. Fast forwarding to the night of the ball, Rudd and Marius get themselves ready for the ball and wait a few minutes for the girls to show up in their outfits. When the time came for the girls to show up, they all turned the heads of the boys all around them, most especially Rudd, who was pretty flabbergasted over Nin's beauty. He stares even more when he finds Lelia, the manly girl, dressed in feminine attire. After admiring each other, they all get to the hall to observe the ball. Moments before the ball begins, they engage each other in a little small talk about both clans until the hall begins to fill up. People recognize the Lady Saint, Nin, and even go as far as calling Nin the leader of the clan. Nin, who was with the real leader of the clan, takes offense to this and tells Rudd to show them all who's boss. Rudd concurs with her thoughts, but then again, he keeps his cool and decides not to cause a scene. Thankfully, Marius, the clown of the group, was there to defuse the situation as he came by and offered to serve them some food. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the lights go dim and the stage lights up to reveal Ike, the sub-leader of the Black Dragon Fang, and Cynthia, the sub-leader of the White Tiger Claw. After introducing themselves, they invite a special guest, Lady Saint Nin, to the stage. As Nin gets into the limelight, she holds Rudd and tells him to accompany her to the stage, which he does gracefully. Ike opens his dirty mouth and talks rashly about Nin becoming an adventurer. Nin tells him she's been wanting to focus on adventuring for as long as she can remember. Ike gets curious and asks her about the man following up the stage. At this point, Rudd takes the lead and names himself the leader of Nin's clan. Ike gets very disrespectful and calls Rudd a tank of a fallen hero party with no power to acclaim himself. To make matters worse, he lets Rudd know that he was the one who advised Kyglass to throw him out of the party, back then when he complained too much about him being useless. After all, Ike seems to believe that tanks aren't needed in a labyrinth raid as they claim to protect their teams while doing nothing. After saying those terrible things about Rudd, Ike ignores him and moves to ask Nin to join their clan. Cynthia cuts in to tell him how much they all need Nin on their team. Rudd notices the argument ensuing and stops them midway. He tells them to stop fighting over Nin since he's not letting either of them have her one bit. Ike gets very disrespectful again and even tries to make a deal with Rudd to trade Nin, but still, Rudd stands his ground and tells the entire crowd that he's there to ally with the two other great clans. By this time, Ike laughs out loud and makes it known that he can't trust a clan led by a tank, so Rudd shouldn't even bother. While this happens, the crowd laughs their arses out. With this, Nin takes to the stage and names Rudd to be the strongest tank out there and even goes as far as challenging anybody to come fight him. Rudd collects the microphone and tells everyone about his plans to get to the 51st floor of the labyrinth that even both great clans couldn't climb. At that, gosh, the real clan leader of the Black Dragon Fang pops out of the shadows to introduce himself to the man strong enough to raid the Keeled Labyrinth. He shakes hands with Rudd and shows him who's boss. Then, he takes the microphone and tells everyone that he's ready to ally with him. Then, he throws the mic to Ms. Lutel, the leader of the White Tiger Claw clan, who says the same thing. Now, all Rudd has to do is to get to the 51st floor of the labyrinth so he doesn't get disgraced even further. After the ball that night, Marius, who is sleeping in the same room as Rudd, promises to stand up for Rudd and make sure his haters eat their words very soon. Shortly afterward, he heads out and leaves Rudd there on his own. Rudd finds the girls in the corridor and meets up with them. Nin thanks him for saving her back there on stage and moves on to her room with Luna. As they walk away from him, Rudd prays to achieve his aim so that he can get this alliance up and running in no time. On his way to his room, Rudd runs into Lily, who looks worried and shy as she peeps out of her dimly lit room. Before Rudd could manage to say a word or two, Lily pulls him into her room and he falls to the ground. Rudd raises his head and finds Lily half-dressed in her nightdress. Surprised, he struggles over what he's to do at the moment. In the end, Lily politely asks him to tie the strings at the back of her dress, which he does. When he's done, Lily becomes happier again and thanks Rudd for the help. At least now she can surprise her sister once again with the tea she's prepared for her. Rudd, who's happy to help another member of his team, turns his back to take his leave, but then Lily stops him from going anywhere and asks for his ears so she can discuss something important with him. Rudd returns to the room and allows Lily to speak her mind. Lily starts the conversation with a few words of encouragement to Rudd for standing up for them back at the ball and confronting everyone as the leader of their little clan. She then compares his courage to hers, which was a little weaker and fragile. Rudd senses there is something Lily wants to tell him and asks her to be free with him. Lily gets very sheepish and asks Rudd to promise that he isn't going to laugh or make fun of her. After swearing that he wouldn't, Lily begins and tells him her deepest, most sincere desire, which is to become independent. Now, you're probably wondering why something as shallow as that would be Lily's deepest desire, but before one judges, one should know that Lily has been dependent on her sister ever since she was little. As of now, there's very little Lily could do on her own, and Lily knows that to be fact. From their fighting style to their normal day-to-day life and even girl stuff, Lily's always the peripheral person, while her sister, Lilia, leads on with an iron fist. Rudd asks Lily to remember that she uses magic too, but then again, Lily reminds him that her sister also uses magic like her, but she's also skilled in taking on close-ranged fights. Even when they fuse, Lilia still always manages to take the lead in their compound personalities. Finally, Rudd understands Lily's predicament and decides to help poor Lily out with her issues. With that, he promises to be there for her if she can make an active effort to be more independent. With this, Lily gets way too happy that she trips and falls on Rudd, who lands on the bed. Lilia, who just finished taking her night shower, walks into the room and finds her sister lying on top of Rudd, whose back was against the soft mattress. Lilia misreads the room and thinks Rudd was trying to take advantage of her sister. Despite Rudd's attempts to explain things to her, Lilia still refuses to change her demeanor towards him. When it comes down to it, she invites him to join her for a discussion on the roof of their hotel. On getting there, Lilia smiles at Rudd, who is busy thinking about how to save his life, and tells him to calm his balls as she doesn't plan on doing anything to him. Apparently, Lilia understands Rudd's predicament, and the Rudd she knows would never try to impose himself on someone else's precious younger sister, so she lets him off the hook. Moving on, Lilia admits to pretending to be annoyed with him so she could bring him up to discuss with him. Then, she starts by asking Rudd if he knows the story behind her and her little sister. Rudd tells her he knows they ran away from home, but then Lilia stops him right there and tells him the entire truth. Back when the duo still lived under their parents, they had to endure various forms of abuse from their father and rely on each other to make it through every day. When they couldn't take it anymore, Lilia and her sister decided to run away from home. Their dad's abuse is part of what contributed to Lily's lack of confidence. With this, she promises Rudd to take her sister to a place where she can truly be happy with herself. Before then, though, she's decided to keep her safe and sound away from the enemies. After hearing all Lilia had to say, Rudd tells Lilia everything that her sister said to her earlier, and lets her know that he doesn't think of her as a perfect person. Rather, he suspects that she's imperfect, judging by how much she loses her cool when it comes to Lily. Lilia concurs with Rudd's thoughts and prepares herself to walk away. Rudd makes her promise to report things to him once the situation permits it, and Lilia walks away. The next day, Rudd takes his team members to the Keeled Labyrinth, where they find Lilia and her sister Lily, smiling and waving at them. Rudd stops to ask them what is happening in the labyrinth, and they tell him that they already made it to the 45th floor. Now, they can use the Danger Walk to teleport themselves to the 45th floor and continue to the 51st floor from there. Lilia takes out her book and reads out a few things she got to know from their little excursion inside the labyrinth. She tells the crew about the tactics the Black Dragon Fang and its rival clan used to climb to the labyrinth floors to the last one. Also, Lilia tells them about the dangerous monsters that are always dealing with status-reducing effects. Rudd smiles as he realizes that this means their attacks won't work on him at all. With this, everybody gets themselves ready for the big challenge in front of them. After bolstering their team spirits, Rudd leads the other team members into the labyrinth to begin their missions. After walking a few meters into the labyrinth, Rudd sits his team down and explains his plan to them. While he leads, Marius brings up the rear, and Luna does melee while Lilia adapts to the situation. As for Nin, she's to focus on healing the team any way she can and accept orders from Lily. Once he's done getting everyone on board, Lilia uses her dungeon walk to teleport everyone to the 45th floor so they can start their raid. On getting to the Sade floor, Rudd leads his team to a Y junction and gets confused over which path is best to pass. Marius informs the team about the monsters waiting for them at the end of the two paths in front of them, and Rudd confirms his suspicions. Nin, who's pretty surprised that Rudd could sense such monsters, asks him how he managed to sense them. Marius tells her he can sense the monsters because he's a labyrinth manager and that's his job. Marius moves on and tells Rudd that the monsters are all interconnected between both paths. This means that in any path they pass through, there's a high chance that they get pinched by monsters hiding in both paths, something like a pincer movement. Marius also tells them they may be dealing with a tricky guardian, so they better know what they're doing. Just then, a poison lizard and a black owl appear from the walls behind them to attack them. Rudd quickly uses his provoking spell to draw the monster's attention to himself. Then, he uses a shield of sacrifice to absorb all their attacks in due time, while the team works on protecting both him and also them. Rudd takes a few jabs for the team and provides several openings for Lilia and the others to attack the distracted monsters. Eventually, Rudd and the others decide to run away from the monsters so they can rest from the attacks. They manage to get this done successfully. During their break time, Nin mentions a jaw-dropping fact about Rudd's shield of sacrifice. According to her findings, they can now choose whether or not to let Rudd's shield absorb their damage. This means that Rudd can finally be free from the burden of having to get all the damage they're meant to suffer. Marius takes this moment to explain a few amazing powers attainable by Rudd if he works harder than he does now. With this, Rudd asks to confirm if Rudd is truly telling the truth. This surprises Marius, and he comments on humans not accepting the truth when they hear it. Rudd takes note of the word human and asks Marius why he said it like that. Marius tells them he's not human, and Rudd asks him to explain what he truly is. Marius, upon hearing this, takes a deep breath and starts his story. Marius explains to the group that he's a demonoid, aka the third being that was created beasted as humans and demi-humans. Although a lot of them were wiped out long ago, he managed to survive and become the manager of that Labyrinth in Avancia. Rudd asks for some meaning to his words, and Marius tells him the true meaning of the labyrinths. While the humans were made to believe that the labyrinths were created to enrich their lives, Marius lets them know that that wasn't the case at all. Rather, he tells them that the demonoid clan created the labyrinths to destroy the human race. As they speak, it's highly possible that this labyrinth is being ruled by a fellow demonoid. Rudd gets a little worried and asks Marius if he is good with fighting, another one of his kind over humans. But then Marius assures them that he's pretty cool fighting them, since he hates their way of life. Rudd and the others agree with Marius's plans and promise to be there for him when he needs them. Moving on, Lily speaks out and asks if she could divulge a plan she's been formulating in her head to fight the monsters on the 50th floor. Rudd and the others move closer to her and listen to her tell them her plan. Following her plan, Rudd and the others finally defeat all the monsters on the other floors till they finally get to the 50th floor. There, they meet a bone dragon, which is said to inflict the highest status-draining effects on the team. According to Lily's plan, Rudd is to charge first with his provoke spell while the rest of them stay out of range with the dragon's attacks. While that happens, Marius and Lilia will attack the dragon from outside the range and make sure to use crushing attacks instead of slashing ones. Since it's also vulnerable to fire magic, Lily points out that they use fire attacks on their swords and hit the enemy with all. They've got till it loses a certain amount of health and comes down. Rudd goes in first and takes considerable damage from the dragon. Then, he rushes away and allows Marius and Lilia to attack the dragon before getting back in position. Even after that, the dragon still unleashes an AoE poison attack that hits Lilia and Marius, hence poisoning their system. While Luna and Nin heal them, Rudd goes in to block the attacks. By doing this, the bone dragon spits out some purple sludge on Rudd's shield, which makes it heavier than usual. Before he loses too much health, Rudd asks his people to douse his shield with some water so he can get his shield back to normal. Nin also sets up an automated healing station that brings everyone's health back to normal in the fight. Still, the bone dragon refused to go down. This time, the dragon opens its mouth and shoots out a large fire beam at everyone. Rudd summons enough courage to go through the fire beam so he can absorb the damage with his shield. He receives more hits and quickly runs to the automated healing station Nin created back then, leaving the dragon to the others to keep him at bay. Once he's back to his usual self, Rudd goes in for a final attack. When he gets close enough, he uses life conversion to return the damage to the dragon and take it out once and for all. With this, they all clear the 50th floor and return home as heroes to rest. That night, Rudd and the others gather together to sell the stuff they got back from the Labyrinth raid. Nin gets super excited and invites them all to a party, but Lilia stops them and asks for some time to rest first. Lily follows suit after greeting everyone goodbye. Rudd gets a little worried at Lilia's actions, but he decides to leave things as it is. Moments later, Rudd and everyone sit around a table in their inn to celebrate getting to the 50th floor of the Labyrinth. They're served waffles and different kinds of exotic meats for their enjoyment. To kickstart their celebrations, Nin dunks down a cup of some post-raid alcohol to celebrate the moment. She gets so happy about the drink that she commends the taste of the alcohol she is being served. Rudd also concurs with her point, and this makes Luna, who was with them the entire time, a little curious about the taste of alcohol. She asks Nin about the taste of alcohol, and Nin encourages her to give it a taste. Rudd gets a little worried about this because no homunculus has ever wanted to drink alcohol before. He takes a look at Luna, who was already drooling for a sip, and gives her the go-ahead to take her first sip of alcohol. Luna collects the cup from Nin and takes her first ever sip of alcohol. Her reaction? Well, let's just say Luna didn't like the bitter taste of alcohol very much, typical for a teetotaler. Nin and Rudd get to laugh at the funny face she made, and Nin tells her that alcohol is more like an acquired taste that she'll come to appreciate with more time and experience drinking it. Luna then asks her why she allowed her to taste the drink, and then Nin tells her that she only wanted to see the funny face she was going to make after taking her first sip of alcohol. Luna gets a little annoyed at Nin's remark, but then Nin closes that chapter by talking about how close Lilia and her twin sister, Lily, are getting these past few days. To keep the twins' secret from spilling into his mouth, Rudd tells her there's probably nothing going on. Luna then speaks out and backs up Nin's statement by telling Rudd that Lilia and Lily have indeed been getting closer recently. Rudd tells the two ladies that although they may not be clan members, he still feels like they do too much to make their clan work out well. Nin checks to confirm if Lilia and Lily are party mates with them or not, and when Rudd tells her that they mean so much more than that, she moves on to trap him with her question. She asks Rudd if he'd like to be more than just party mates with her alone, and waits for his answer. Well, Rudd takes his time to point things out for Nin. He explains the heavy burdens he feels on his mind. Burdens like raiding the labyrinths, proving their strength to everyone, and even saving his sister. With all these obsessions, there's almost no space in his heart for emotional trauma. Sorry, dating a woman. Nin, who seems fine with his reply, indirectly tells him she's going to wait for him. Luna, however, confesses the butterflies she feels in her belly whenever she's around Rudd. Rudd stutters over what to say and tries to change the subject by asking for water. Nin was there for all of it, and she enjoyed watching Rudd apologize for nothing. When it's all over, Rudd gets to his room and surprisingly finds Lilia sleeping on his bed. Surprised, he calls her name and waits for her to wake up. When she does, he asks her to tell him what she was doing in his bed, and Lilia tells him she was led to his room by Marius as she wanted to talk to him. When she found no one there, she decided to take a nap. Rudd reasons with her explanation and asks Lilia to tell him what she wants to tell him. Lilia starts by telling Rudd about Lily's weird behavior that day. Apparently, Lily worked harder that day in the labyrinth, and Lilia was a little surprised. After telling Rudd about Lily's ability to do stuff easily, Rudd assures her that it's probably because they're twins. On the other hand, Rudd notices the worried look on Lilia's face and asks her about it. Lilia lets him know she's scared of her sister changing, as she wouldn't know what to expect at all. Rudd lets her know that it's normal to be afraid of change, as change brings a lot of unexpectedly new things to the populace. However, another thing change does is that it also brings hope and opportunity for those who are ready for it. He makes an example of Avancia and how much things have changed since the labyrinth first appeared in the forest. Although Rudd was a little scared initially, he's learned to accept the fact that change is always going to be constant. He can either learn from it or run from it. With this, Lilia confesses to being weaker than her twin sister, and now fears that Lily will drift away from her despite her protecting Lily for ages. Rudd notices a problem brewing up with Lilia and wonders what he's to do about it. He assures her that although things change, the fact that Lilia and Lily are twins forever will never change. Lilia smiles for the first time in their conversation and thanks Rudd for giving her matter a little more thought than she expected. She gets up and recounts the good things Lily did that day. Then, she promises to never turn her back on her little sister and heads back to her room to get some sleep. The following day, Rudd and his people all get to the first floor of the labyrinth to discuss a few things with his team before they continue to the 51st floor. After gathering everyone together, Rudd gives the floor to Lily to brief the team on her plan. Lily explains just how strange the 51st floor is and tells them to expect dense fog around the floor due to something unknown yet. Rudd puts her in charge of monster detection and then assigns Luna to be on her guard while he and Marius search around for monsters of any sort. Luna, upon hearing Rudd's voice speaking to her, shudders in embarrassment and apologizes to Rudd for the things she said to him the previous night. Rudd accepts her apology and gives Lilia the go-ahead to teleport them to the 51st floor. On getting to the 51st floor of the Keeled Labyrinth, Rudd and his people find the entire place engulfed in a very dense fog. Rudd orders Luna to clear the fog with her wind spell, but after clearing the fog once, it returns to its original position. Marius suggests that the fog is probably made of mana, and that's why it won't clear when Luna tried using her magic. He then suggests that since the monsters here have mana, Rudd could try using his perception abilities to figure out where the monsters are and fish them out. Rudd appreciates the idea and uses his perception ability to fish out a weird monster Lilia called the Sahagin. Now these monsters can manipulate their bodies and turn them into liquid. They also control any water source around them. and use the element for coordinated attacks. The Sahuagin monsters attack Rudd and his crew, pulling them with their watery limbs any chance they get. Luna uses her wind spells to try splitting them, but nothing works against these people. Rudd perceives the monsters and figures out a place they haven't touched yet. After the others run towards the place, Rudd uses his provoke spell to bring the monster to him so he can attack them. Suddenly, 3 Sahuagin monsters corner Rudd and threaten to bring him down. Marius cuts in and saves Rudd from the pinch he's in. Using the knowledge they all learned in the short time they've spent on the 51st floor, they destroy the Sahuagin and a few other monsters that came their way. In a few more hours, they clear that level and get ready to move to the next one. Before continuing their journey though, the girls get down to cook a nice meat meal from the Sahuagin monsters they killed earlier, and although this sounded disgusting to Marius, the pretty boy amongst the crew, they still managed to eat all the meat. Meanwhile, Rudd and Lilia discuss the materials they harvested from the monsters they killed, and realize that they all cost a lot in the market. Food is ready in a jiffy, and everyone digs in. After food, they get to the 52nd floor and notice them being in a dark boss room. Suddenly, a magic circle appears in front of them, and a dark skeleton and his 3 green, blue, and yellow balls pop up from the ground. Rudd gets ready to fight the skeleton despite its powerful demeanor, and even rushes at the skeleton to hit it at least once. Upon getting close to the skeleton, a yellow barrier is created by the yellow orb, or ball, floating around the dark skeleton. Rudd and his people take note of this and get themselves ready for the next attack. This time, the skeleton uses the red ball to launch a fire attack on Rudd, who blocks it. Then, he lunges at Rudd with his swords and enchants them with the blue orb. After showing Rudd all of his tricks, the skeleton waits for his counter. Rudd counters the skeleton by provoking the skeleton to attack only him, while Marius and Lilia attack from behind. Well, that doesn't work that well, but then Rudd advises them to keep up the pressure so they can somehow wear down the skeleton to exhaustion. To defend itself, the skeleton produces a very bright light that blinds everyone. When things get back to normal, both Marius and Rude notice Lilia acting strange. After wiggling her body around for a few seconds, she rushes towards Marius and attacks him without question. From the look of things, Lilia was remembering her terrible father and the way he abused her and her poor little sister. She thought she was reliving the experience and started taking it out on poor Marius, who tries his best not to hurt her. Rudd notices Lilia's strange actions and calls her name to stop her. Nin, who he called to heal her up, notices Luna and Lily getting affected by the status-draining effects and opts in to heal them first. Rudd lets her do her thing and uses his life conversion on the monster so he can buy them some time. He then assigns Marius to defeat the skeleton while he fights Lilia. Rudd pins Lilia to the ground and realizes what is wrong with her. He recalls his balcony meeting with her and realizes that she's probably reliving the terrible history of her dad beating up herself and her kid sister. He assures her that her sister is fine, and Lilia suddenly snaps back to normal. Rudd appears in her memories and holds her hand to get her back to normal. Lilia cries a little and scolds herself for being so susceptible to the dark skeleton's magic. Rudd concurs with her thoughts and joins Marius to take down the dark skeleton. This time, Rudd douses himself with some water from Nin's magic and charges towards the dark skeleton to land a blow on him. The dark skeleton blocks his attack and forces Rudd to think outside the box. He comes up with a plan to use both magic and physical attacks at the same time, so they can weaken it. Besides, he urges Lilia and Nin to use their water magic in conjunction with their fire magic to take down the barrier in front of them. The 3 ladies do this, and end up weakening the yellow magical barrier. Rudd continues attacking it, with Marius and Lilia supporting him. The dark skeleton trees blinding everyone with its status, draining powers again, but this time, it doesn't work as everyone directs their elemental magic at the crazy skeleton. Rudd rushes into the attacks, absorbs some of them, and uses life conversion to turn them into heavy damage, which weakens the skeleton temporarily. Just then, the skeleton gets up again and splits itself in 2. Rude and the others figure out the real one and attack it with all they've got. Rude notices the movement of the skeleton changing and destroys the yellow barrier finally with his shield. Marius and Lilia also join in the fight and end up bringing the skeleton down. Rude picks up the skeleton's magic stone and asks Lilia to find their magic circle so they can take a break. After using her detection magic for a few minutes, she's surprised she couldn't find it. This can only mean one thing. They're on the bottom floor. Rudd asks Marius for clarification, and he tells them that there's a high chance that they just defeated the boss monster of the entire labyrinth. Rudd cuts his losses and prepares himself to leave. Just then, the guardian of the labyrinth shows up and bites him on the neck. Then, she spawns more dark skeletons and leaves Rudd and his people to fight them all. Rudd and his crew are shocked at the monstrosities appearing before them at the moment and are confused over what to do.